Welcome to Exploration Session Summaries. Exploration sessions are offered online as opportunities to speak and listen to each other in a sincere effort to gain understanding about each other's perspectives on a World Conference resolution. A single resolution is the focus of 5 sessions each week. At the conclusion of each session, the breakout groups share a summary of their conversations. This podcast includes all small groups' summaries on one resolution. For more information about exploration sessions, go to seaofchrist.org/2023-world-conference.
Most of us had opportunities working and developing worship services or other sorts of ministries. And so digitally, it provides the option of copy and paste and print out. So that really makes it easy access if our scriptures were digitally available. When some of the books are Doctrine and Covenants or some of the others, the print can be really small. So if it was digital, it would be easier for viewing, and particularly for those who are visually impaired. Copyright concerns were brought up, life experience in dealing with copyright. So how does that impact this kind of a project and the cost that would come? Also, the inspired version is using the King James Version of the Bible, which was last translated in 1881. And it, according to King James Version, is the last and authoritative word on the Bible. So therefore, it is outdated Bible translation. And digital is better for the environment. Then on question 2, question about which version of the Bible would be available if it was created digitally. And although the inspired version and the Book of Mormon are available with the Mormon Church, it's better to have a CFC context. And making it inclusive for all of the church and its languages would be important. Challenges: which Bible version would be done? What's the cost of translation? The cost of copyright and copyright permission? What would be the timeline and insights? The need of other languages other than English, French, and Spanish. That would also be important to have access to these scriptures. The complexity of such a project. The more we talk, the more we realize how complex and complicated this kind of a project would be. And scriptures online could bring people to the church.
I did hear many similarities with room 1, but I'll bring you some of our additional thoughts. So as far as experiences, we just enjoy the convenience and the easy access of having scriptures available to us online. Some of us talked about living in a bilingual setting or a multilingual setting, and how it is very challenging for non-English speaking members to sometimes find what they need as far as the Doctrine and Covenants and other scriptures online. And even the frustration of sometimes finding the English version of Doctrine and Covenants. If our print version is one of the older ones, we may not be able to find some of the missing, so-called missing ones, the later ones that are not in our printed version. For the benefit or the impact, we recognize that so many people are now using the internet and their electronic devices for all sorts of reading material and research material. And print books are not as commonly used. And so having this available on print is just makes a lot of sense for the way modern society is working now. It's easier and quicker to seek answers to our questions and find references that we're looking for in the scriptures. It would also allow members to have equal access across the different languages in our church, for them to have equal access to scriptures and encourage home study, as well as study in church. We also saw it as an evangelism tool. And we also discussed quite thoroughly all the different translations of the Bible. And so I'm interested, Sandy, you all talked about that as well. Our first question was, why wasn't this done years ago? We had questions about the cost and recognizing that translation can be costly. And we also questioned about the timeline and when would it be reported back to us. And we had one member of our group whose kids asked, isn't there an app for that? That was the kids' questions. The challenges were for us to be patient and recognizing that this is a time-consuming process. We also see that perhaps new staff would need to be hired to manage such a time-consuming project, and that creates a challenge for the church. New insights gained were what it's like to live in a bilingual or multilingual mission center. And our final word was, we don't want to wait to start. Let's do it.
We discussed the online to a certain extent too, and most of that has been covered. We did concentrate a little bit more on the hard copies, being women who were perhaps older and used to reading things not online. As we grew up, we all had access to the scriptures, and so we wanted everyone to have access. And we thought about the books in our libraries that sit in our church libraries, that maybe we could be more aware of giving them to seekers and those who attend our services, offering them to them more. We did think it was a wonderful idea and questioned why it hadn't been done before to make these scriptures available to everyone. And one participant in our group did not have access to the scriptures and said, yes, please, when we asked if that person wanted the scriptures. So there are many evidently waiting to have them. The challenge that we saw was, is it doable financially? Are we able to do this right away? We thought about the Herald in Every Home program and how important that was to so many of our local congregations and people who don't attend that still get the Herald, and it means a lot to them that they can read it. Perhaps it could be funded partly by the local congregations, and then perhaps to expand the number of languages that it would be offered to other people.
We had a variety of life experiences using Bible Gateway, Restoration, RLDS Scriptures, Restored Gospel, YouVersion, Kindle, just a number of ways. We did find out this doctrine-and-covenants.com. It pointed out one of the things we wanted to highlight in our second part was that the last 20 years of the Doctrine and Covenants needs to be the priority as we see it, because there's not much out there besides that. We found the benefits to the church are evangelism, cut and paste, convenience, availability. Some said it felt kind of embarrassing that we didn't have that as a church, universal. It's of course nice to have it, the other languages, and our big question was funding, format, platform, updatable, all those kind of questions, as well as, but we saw it as a logical path. And we had the input of meeting sponsors information. Why this resolution? That needs to be one of the questions that was missing from, because we would have liked to have gotten some input as to why the resolution came. The convenience of having the phone, the availability, 145 and up RLDS doctrine needs to be updated. Evangelism, like I said, is one of the things.
Part of our life experiences involved just simply helping to provide scriptures to people who needed financial help with the print ones. Someone was thinking about the idea of some college textbooks, which are only available online sometimes. And if you don't have access to that information, you're relying on someone else to interpret it for you. That's the same thing with the scriptures. If people don't have access, then they have to depend on someone else. Becoming more aware of a global perspective and involvement in interfaith relationships. It's a challenge sometimes to share further scriptures related to peace and justice when we don't have a digital link to be able to send someone to. It could help the church in terms of accessibility issues for those who need to use a reader for larger type. Cutting and pasting, again, would affirm the value of our scriptures by making them readily available and easy to share with others who may be seeking, rather than having to send them to outside sites, because at the moment, the inspired version is not available anywhere except through us. The only Book of Mormon access that we were available of is basically through the LDS Church, and there is no easy digital access to the complete Doctrine and Covenants. It could help definitely with shipping costs and make it easier for people to have access to the scriptures. One point that was made was that more people apparently have access to cell phones than to bathrooms in the world. So there might be more people having digital access than we think about. We did have some questions about copyright issues. If we make it free to everyone, do we lose control of it? Could people download and edit it? What format would it be created in? The financial impact? How long would it take for this to happen if the resolution passes? And would the print form continue to be made available so that we don't create an additional layer of access, because there are still a number of folks who like the print? How would we determine any additional languages? How would we prioritize them? And there also were some concerns about controlling the content and the potential for use and abuse of the scriptures. But overall, I think our group was supportive of the resolution. There's still a number of questions that need to be talked about and answered.
Much of what's been said was discussed in ours. One of the things that I haven't heard yet was that it was brought up that going digital, we aren't using as much of the natural resources, so that would be a step in our good stewardship of our earth. There were some concerns about ensuring translation accuracy and security of the text, which I've heard also. And we talked about loss of revenue versus benefit of the ease of access. One of the things that was brought up for the benefits is, when we have people looking online or looking for scriptures, sometimes if we don't have what they need or what they're looking for at that moment, we might lose them, as far as this was an avenue that could have been introduced to our community of faith. So we saw this as a very positive thing. Cross-cultural, cross-lingual ministry, obviously a very good benefit from it. Also, when you've got one document that you can cut and paste from, as I've heard you say, there's consistency in the translation and the use of the verbiage. It's not something that you're going to transcribe. Well, you could still anyway, but if you're the type that likes to take the cut and paste, it's what's there is what's going to be used, instead of trying to figure out how to reword it in your own words. One of the issues that was also brought up was, we hope that as the church progresses and explores this, that they will, when they present it to the membership to actually take action on it, I presume that's their intent, is that they will provide us with the data that I've heard people saying. What's the feasibility? What's the cost versus the loss of revenue? That kind of thing. What's the plan? Let's not just do it. Let's plan on maintaining this wonderful step in the right direction, which is what we all felt. It was reassuring to hear the church talking about this resolution, or the members of the church talking about the resolution using our Community of Christ scriptures. So it's awesome.
In question 1, our life experiences inform. We talked about how we liked holding the books. That they kind of opened to where we kind of wanted them to, because we'd used them so much that you could picture what you had written or underlined, and you knew what side of the page it was on. You knew all of that. But we also talked about that was historically kind of discriminatory, because not everybody does have access, especially if it's from a foreign country. Our scripture is thick and hard to move around. And also that the printed copies aren't as accessible now as they used to be. We used to have bookstores that made sure that we had access to what we needed. They could order what we needed, that we don't see as much anymore. We have lots of people who would they'd rather read it on their phones or the iPad as opposed to in our hands, though some of us still really like that. And then it's highlighting it on paper is easier. So those were the things that kind of like was our setup, how we were going in with those opinions, but or those background. The benefit and impact was that everybody around the world would have access to our scriptures, that we would hope that they would be hooked to the website so that it would be a direct link from the website, because that's where people would land first, is at our website. Again, a reminder that America notwithstanding, there are other countries that have a history of having a harder time getting the scriptures. The benefit would be our outreach would be enormous. Anybody coming new into the church would probably access them online as opposed to ever having a paper copy. But then there's some questions about cost and how long. But another benefit would be there's no secrecy. Anybody can read it online. And especially people that might come in with a negative idea of us, they could look at it if they're really interested and then get the positive part. They also might just stumble across it. And then the last one, what are the challenges and the insights? The biggest challenge we thought was the time, that we have over 1,800 pages in our scriptures. And so that's a lot of time for the translation, for the putting it into the format. Hopefully there would be a committee and they could split it up and it wouldn't take so much time. It hasn't been available on the internet before, and that's going to be helpful. There was insight about not realizing that it was discriminatory not to have it available that way. A couple of us really want a search engine so that we can use it for research as well. And then how long is it going to take? Are we going to see it in our lifetime was another thing.
In terms of our life experiences, we've had a lot of experience with cell phones, using a cell phone and having access to one, having access to the internet. Didn't necessarily mean that we didn't necessarily all access scriptures from our cell phones, but we know that it's available and that we can do it. In what ways that this could benefit the community of Christ, or what the impact might be? Well, it was said that reading scripture, one, is a spiritual practice, and that it can be a very transformative practice, and that by having the scriptures available freely and to anyone that has access to the internet, the reach of the scriptures would be greatly expanded, and there could be a large impact, a large benefit from that. I think we did a good job of raising a lot of questions about this resolution. We wondered what the cost would be and what barriers already exist to making this happen. In terms of cost, would the church lose revenue from people not purchasing books anymore, or would there be a large number of people that still want to have books and that they would continue to purchase them? We wondered about the IT department of the church. Is it robust enough to do this in the near future? We wondered who we're leaving out in this resolution. So, for example, the blind. Internet access and phone usage is pretty much worldwide, but we do wonder, what that number is that do not have access and that do not have phones. Again, the challenge for us seemed to be just the IT capacity and just a lot of unknowns around this project, what it would take to get it done. We also wondered about maybe a next step would be having audible products, being able to listen to the Bible being read, or any of these scriptures being read. That would be desirable in the future.
We agree that online multi-language scriptures would be very helpful and useful. We wonder what resources would be required, both monetarily as well as human resources, to make this resolution be enacted. There may be some resources that are already in place or have been made in place in times past that could be utilized to enable the scriptures to be online. We're not real sure, but we had some questions about how this would get prioritized with many of the other competing efforts within the church and what prominence this might take to supersede some other things, or how it would be ranked in that priority. We're well aware that not everybody has access to print scripture, but there are also groups of people who do not have access to technology. And so having access to technology might be a hindrance in getting access to scriptures online. We also noted that for some, I won't say specialized groups, but segments of the organization, LDS seekers, third world countries, it might be advantageous to have something online for them to access that would be less threatening than if they had the actual printed word in their residence or close by someplace where they could get access to it.
Yeah, first of all, we fully support the intent of the resolution, but we had lots of questions about it. And I think the other groups have sort of voiced some of those questions, but one question that I had was, who are the target audience people for this project? I was thinking, is it people who have access to technology, like they just said? Is it poor homeless people? And would their technology be a phone, a cell phone, or somebody else just mentioned an iPad? And I can't imagine that they would probably have access to a laptop or a computer, except maybe at a library, if such a thing exists. Would we want to do all 3 books, or maybe 1 book at a time, or, would there be any priority there? Is World Conference the appropriate body to act on this resolution? Because the resolution calls for a committee to be formed. But beyond that, there's, a lot of questions, and where does it go from there? We support what was said about the Audible version and others, because my partner in this group is bedridden and her eyes don't always work well. And so Audible version would be very helpful. I think that covers it.
We are supportive of increasing accessibility of scriptures certainly in the 3 languages. And we are aware that we come to this from a life of privilege where we have not had to struggle to access either buying or receiving as gift scriptures. We have an increased awareness of those without accessibility. And a number of our points have already been mentioned in terms of internet access and other concerns. So I won't repeat those. One of the things that's unique from our group, from what we've heard so far, is a struggle with the inspired version. I know that was one of the 3 books that was mentioned. And while none of us in our group utilized the inspired version as our first go-to, we had concern about the relevance of that book. And we felt that having the Doctrine and Covenants online was definitely something we were very interested in. We were unsure of the relevance of the Book of Mormon across various cultures outside of North America. And so we would want to look into that. And the suggestion of perhaps starting with one book and moving into others, if that were a recommendation, I think our recommendation would be to start with the Doctrine and Covenants. In terms of benefits, we see the potential for growth for those that are seeking information about the church and reading, especially Doctrine and Covenants sections, and finding this to be a spiritual home for them, as well as greater accessibility of all of our members to scriptures, provided they have the internet access. We support a searchable format where it could be searched not only by scripture, but by topics. And we felt that having topic searches done could expose our scriptures to people who might not even know they exist, that they may just pop up in various search engines as a result of that. In terms of impact, we're aware that there are places around the world where some of our more recent sections, especially including those regarding sexual orientation or gender identity could have a negative impact if leaders or governments in certain countries that are more conservative or restrictive were to find out. That's what we include in our theology and in our scriptures. And then there was a question that if the first presidency doesn't prioritize this, we still have the issue of making sure members have access to scripture. In terms of additional challenges beyond the computer technology feasibility and capacity, back to the inspired version, we know that on the books, the inspired version is the official version of the Bible held by the church. And yet, if you look at the leadership, what they use in public ministry, as well as what's used in writing, including in our Herald, that doesn't seem to be congruent with, so practice and policy may be two different things. And this may lead the first presidency to have to deal with the issue of what will we do with the inspired version. So that may lead to some healthy and perhaps painful conversations.
We all decided that we came from the same perspective that we can afford to pay for online resources, but we also said it would be really handy to have those scriptures on the church website or free. We really think it's important to have easy access to the scriptures for all people. We think that it would benefit people so much being able to use it in worship services. You could have it on screen. You could have it enlarge the size of the print if it were on a website. You could use it for study groups, and it would be convenient for travel. It might be a benefit in that we might get some new members if we increase that easy access, and to make sure that all that can be done is done to open the scriptures to as many people as possible. We thought we could maybe purchase the scriptures for a friend or family if they were low cost, or we could direct them towards a friend or family. We thought that sharing scriptures with seekers would be easier if there was a free copy on the church website. We also noted that the next generation accesses resources online, so it would be important to have those online for them. We had some questions and challenges. The first was the cost of having this available for free, space on the website, because these are large documents. We don't know about that. And the personnel to actually put these online. We don't want to have an extra work burden for church employees that would take time away from other ministries. We're wondering about how this would assist people in remote areas who don't have Wi-Fi, don't have electricity. And so we're wondering, who are we trying to reach with this resolution? We wonder about the resolution asking for the inspired version and wonder if that is essential because other versions of the Bible are online for free already. We're concerned about the financial situation. I guess I touched on that already, of the church in general at this time. And would like to see on the resolution the need for a timeline attached to make it more concrete and helpful. We also, going back to the accessibility part of the scriptures, putting them on the church website right now, we are concerned that maybe the search feature on the church website needs to be addressed, because searching for things online is not always easy, and access is not always easy on church website. And the last two things for insights would be to maybe make a line item in our congregational budgets to purchase Kindles and put scriptures on them for people to borrow who couldn't afford to buy them. And the last question was, well, if we have a book form, is the next step then to make it searchable, which is altogether another thing.
Most of the people in our group have had experience and good experience with electronic versions of scriptures that have been available elsewhere and for a number of years, not to mention lifelong familiarity with the use of scripture in the paper versions. We appreciate the ability with electronic versions to print out exactly what we need and for sermon or for classwork. But we do caution against relying entirely on the computer at work, because anything can happen and you need to have paper available as a backup anyway. Many questions about the challenges, the processes, and the expense of translation and of electronic publishing. We note that there are electronic versions of newspapers out there, as well as the paper versions, and most people in our group seem to prefer the paper version. We understood the need for electronic versions, and we also like the ability to reference various versions of the Bible for study and for preaching. No problem with the resolution overall. Someone said that if given preference, would probably still go to the paper version because they can more easily see cross references and go down different roads and so on in study Bibles. Someone mentioned that this was a good thing in their view. They felt that section 163.7 was written directly for them in terms of the caution against worshiping Scripture, and was reminded that we're to worship only God, but Scripture is an insight into the mind of God, and this is another way to spread that insight in a greater way. No problem with the resolution. Again, questions about the financial impact on the church. Concerns about access in terms of the general access of the internet to people in North America and around the world, but a tremendous benefit to the church for those who do have access to the internet for the scriptures to be available online. Someone said they were all for it. It should have been there yesterday. It sees lots of benefits for online access. We note that lots of us have multiple devices to access them, computers, phones, tablets, and so on. Very important to get the Doctrine and Covenants out there for the world to see, especially the most recent revelations. Again, concerns about the cost of staffing, especially to the church at the current moment, costs of maintenance, costs of monitoring, and so on. And just quickly on a couple of challenges. Actually, we would suggest a separate site be dedicated to this rather than bundling it into the existing church website. That would avoid the challenge of navigating the website to find it. And then there's the issue of the inspired version being a specific part of the motion. And we just are a little concerned that that could raise some debate. And the inspired version is just a whole other beast as compared to the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants.
We decided that we are very excited about the opportunity to dialogue about translation of the scriptures for the church, that we think that'll be a very exciting conversation to have. We feel as an international church that we are definitely called to be inclusive, and this is one area where it would definitely involve inclusivity with language, and that we feel that as a faithful people that we want to go and attend to the things that God is calling us to. And so we love the idea and the opportunity to talk about this. Really, our only question was in regards to resources and cost, but we definitely feel like this could be addressed and would be addressed if it got to First Presidency or into committee.
Much of what we said has been said. We did know that there are some people who do not have the money to buy hard copies of our scriptures and would make it more affordable for them. And it would be nice to have it in other languages. We wouldn't want to encourage Herald House not to continue to make hard copies, because there are people, well, there are uses for hard copies. I mark my scriptures up a lot. Okay. It would be nice to have a better concordance. However, it might not have as much of a need for a concordance with search features in electronic versions. We too wondered about the cost of the church. Can the church afford it? We wondered if there's any legality associated with publishing this online. Looking ahead, if this happens, do we need to help people in poorer countries and areas get internet access? Because not everyone has access to the internet. And we think it would help with outreach and help us to be more inclusive. We're wondering how it will be accomplished and what the timeline would be. And could we donate to help people who can't afford being online, or communities? You know, I'm thinking of poor areas. Maybe we could help get internet set up in their church or something of that nature so that everyone could come to the church and have access. One thing that was mentioned that was really interesting, one member mentioned that cell phones are much easier to get in India than our landlines. One fellow had to wait 10 years to get a landline, but a fellow with oxen and a plow in a field might be talking on a cell phone.
Most of us were lifelong members. We had one adult convert to the church, but most have the experience of being in the church for many years, comfortable with the scriptures and using the scriptures, that the value of having the scriptures and the availability of that is really important. It was the general feeling of our group that this particular resolution would be extremely beneficial. We do live in a digital age, and having that accessibility for our scriptures is really important. Even though we can access many of those already, I think there's some concerns about, number one, the finances of it. What does it mean financially to the church to have the availability so that it's convenient and user friendly? Do we have the money to do it? And there's also other legal considerations too that are a concern. Are we observing copyright laws and those kinds of things? What hurdles are there that maybe we aren't even aware of? But being able to access it seems to be a positive thing, and it can be a wonderful tool for us. Just as the Book of Mormon was a wonderful tool in the early church, this can be a valuable tool for us today. We want to be able to make sure, though, that it's user-friendly, that it has the capabilities and functionality that I can send a link to someone and say, yeah, here's what I'm talking about. Take a look at it. The concern always comes back to the financial resources required to make it happen. And then if a committee is appointed to do this, we want to make sure that we've got the right IT people that are engaged in putting it together so that, again, it's a user-friendly, and maybe it needs to be thought of in terms of an app. Create an app that would have that accessibility. And the concern, of course, is making it available for those that don't have money, but maybe we had a free app, but there could be an enhanced version for a small fee. And that might be a way to help offset some of the cost. I don't know. I think the challenge for us has the cost, the people to do it the right way, but having the conversation has been deeply appreciated. And that's really credit to the church for doing these kinds of things. And we greatly appreciate all of the facilitators and everyone that make this possible so we can discuss it. So thank you. And we hope that we can have a valuable tool as a result.
A lot of the same questions that have already been shared, we had as well. One of our first questions was, at the core of it, while we appreciated the true benefits that this could offer in availability and access for membership and seekers, we really wanted to and hope that we would hear more on the resolution conversation about why this is being brought forth. Is the purpose for witness and evangelism? Is it for access for study? Is it happen to be for all of those things? If it's about universal access, though, we did have a concern of how that still might not serve the purpose for all, especially in areas where our church growth is occurring in poorer areas where digital access may not be readily available, where literacy comes into question as to whether or not, even if they had digital access, that they would be able to read those versions that are currently available. So we recognize this as a positive first step conversation, but would hope that in addition to the conversation, considering the universal aspect for those areas who would not, by this resolution as written, seem to meet those needs of those people. So that was an issue in addition to the same sort of thing, making sure that what is made available as future translations are worked upon, the continual cost of that, and how those translations in new languages would take place, having to find correct translators, and the importance of making sure translation is not so much literal, but conceptual to those areas and languages that would be released. We also brought up
whether or not this is even needed as a legislation. If it's more just an administrative next step process, we assume that's going to come up in conversation as well. And then also the question came up of what versions, editions of the inspired version, Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants, would be used for these. And then if we were talking about making available all these scriptures, would it also be beneficial to make available some of our other documents, such as our hymnal? And then it was also brought up, would it be beneficial to look at concise, broken down versions of these different scriptures that would be more concise and consumable in those areas that it might be more difficult in terms of availability?
The very first thing that we noted is that this is a resolution that is going to be studied by the First Presidency or a committee to explore it. So we up front wanted to recognize that. Even so, we did a lot of talk about, implementing it and all of that kind of thing. And as has already been said, one of the benefits is that it would make the scriptures available to a wide variety of people. And especially I wanted to note that if you could have it digitized like that, you could download it on your phone. So wherever you went, you would have the scriptures in hand rather than carrying a book around with you. We especially talked about having the Doctrine and Covenants digitized. The Latter-day Saints do have the Book of Mormon digitized. Of course, that's their own version, but the Doctrine and Covenants, is not at all for us, at least. And so it would give availability not only for the later revelations, not only for access to some helps with people's personal lives or church lives, but also provide a history of the community of Christ. So it's got a lot in there that would help those searching or seeking to know more about the church. It also, I thought, interesting enough, it would give opportunity for us as a community of Christ to share our faith more easily with other faiths, other denominations. For example, World Religion Day, when we talk about a variety of faith groups, that would give the opportunity to provide for them access to our scriptures. It would also provide, even though we know it would take a long time to implement it if this resolution is passed, it does give hope to those who are waiting for the day when they can read those scriptures, knowing that it's being studied, it's being worked on, would give them a sense of hope. We did talk about one of the challenges is just how would it be implemented. And one of the ideas that came out of that perhaps we could get volunteers to do the translation, which would be pretty neat, where you didn't have to pay for the cost of it, which would be pretty great. But we do recognize that it's a multifaceted issue. It's not a simple digitize the scriptures and we have it, but it touches, a lot of different parts of the church life. And so we wanted to recognize that as well.
In addition to what was already said about the inspired version, we discussed that there are already online plenty of Bible translation sites that people could go to if they wanted to look up other translation to the Bible besides the inspired version. And so the inspired version would probably be the only version we needed to look at for putting the scriptures online. And then we kind of had a little side thing about, had the church ever tried to get the inspired version on any of the Bible translation sites? We also felt it was important to make sure that languages outside of English, Spanish, and French are not forgotten. Putting the scriptures online should not replace people having hard copies of the scriptures. In addition to what's been said about putting the scriptures online, we came up with, exactly what do we mean by putting the scriptures online? Are we talking something as simple as putting them on in PDF format? Or another thing is, are we talking about putting them on with a search engine so they'd be really good for studying and helping people find what they're looking for? There could be a number of ways of doing so. Also, if the resolution passes, we need to make sure we explore existing platforms that have Community of Christ scriptures already on them. There's some individuals, there's some congregations that have some resources already out there, so perhaps some of them could be incorporated into this project. And then finally, the resolution needs to have some language added to it for when the First Presidency needs to report back.
in addition to what has already been said, we said that a lot of us don't carry our scriptures with us to church on Sunday. So if this was in a format that we could have easily on our phone or an iPad, it might make it easier for us in our worship and our study on a Sunday. Two concerns that we had, one was security. If this was available, would it be possible for people to hijack it, change the verbiage, and then thus represent us inaccurately with our scriptures? And the other thing was, would it be possible to maybe do one book at a time so that we could spread the cost and kind of do a trial period with one of the books and make it a little bit easier for us to answer some of the questions that we have about the cost and the format?